On today's show, the Dallas Mavericks have 22 games left to try and figure out what this team is. So I got 3 big questions for them, starting with, how good are Luka and Kyrie together? We'll talk about that and more on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks.
Mavericks, NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good! And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show and making Locked On Mavs your first listen each and every day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms 5 days a week and every post game on every podcast platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day, watch every day, whichever one, and to comment anything below. Let us know today, what's your one biggest question about the Mavericks heading into the last 22 games? Only 22 games left in the season. This season has been weird, and I'm excited to see where it goes. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started. Isaac Harris dealing with a 3-year-old birthday party. Think he would rather be here, but this is where we are in life at this point. It's kind of crazy to me sometimes to think about how many of you listening, like if you're listening right now, actually, let's do this. If you're listening right now and you have been listening for longer than Isaac's daughter has been alive, which is 3 years. So that's a lot of you. That's back, I don't know, what is 3 years ago? I have to go back to, let's see, 3 years ago, 1, 2, 3. We would be in the 2020 season. So if you guys listened during the pandemic, when the NBA was stopped, or the bubble, like if you preceded the bubble listening to Locked On Mavs, let us know in the comment section. Tweet at Isaac, at Isaac L. Harris. Just say like congrats. I don't know. Just do something with that. Today's episode, I got 3 big questions. Got to do the Dirk 3. 3 biggest questions for the last 22 games of the Mavericks season now that we are post All-Star. This is not second half of the season. Some people will say second half of the season. It's not. But it is like the second half of the NBA season if you count playoffs as like a whole big part of it. But it's not the second half of the Mavs regular season, that's for sure. We are a ways into it. And so I need to know, how good are Luka and Kyrie together? The last 22 games, we have to learn that before the playoffs. 2, who else steps up? I think the Mavericks have one more rotation spot in the playoffs to fill. Now, they're not all going to be great. We know this. We'll talk about that. But who else steps up into that 9th spot? And then, what is the defense capable of? This Mavericks team is going to be all offense. Jason Kidd has made it very clear that this is an all offense team at this point. But what is the defense capable of? I want to know that. So let's start with that. Or we'll just start with talking about what it's capable of in the 3rd segment. But let's start here. Mavericks, according to record, have the easiest schedule the rest of the way. Now, there is no easy in the NBA, right, anymore. You just take a look at the Western Conference standings, where the Lakers are 2 games out of the play-in, and there are people out there that would say, "Oh, watch out for the Lakers." I know we've been saying that for months, but watch out for the Lakers. The revamped Lakers, they changed their team up. They got 2 all-star type players. But like, that's how deep the West is that Lakers team is still 2 games out of the play-in. You have so many teams from 1 to 10. It's basically 1 through 10 are like all still in it. Spurs and the Rockets are out. Like there's no shot. I mean, the Spurs are what? 15 games out of the 10th seed? It's out. They're done. When they get mathematically eliminated is that's coming. It's coming soon. Like 15. There's only like 20 some games left. So the Mavericks, according to Tankathon, and just going record-wise, I know Tankathon looks at strength of schedule and just says, all right, this team has this winning percentage, so they're 1. This team has a lower winning percentage, so they're 2, and so on. The Mavericks have the easiest schedule the rest of the way. There's been a lot of changes, but they play the Spurs 3 times. They play the Hornets twice in a weird home and home. They play the Bulls, Pacers twice. Pacers seem to have fallen off a little bit here. The Lakers, who knows what state they're going to be in. They play them twice. And then they play the Jazz, who have now fallen off a little bit. The Pelicans probably without Zion. The Warriors probably without Steph. That one's coming up in March. And then they're their tough teams. The Suns, Kings, Sixers twice, Heat, Grizzlies twice, and then the Hawks. Who knows what Hawks team you get on any given night. But it's like 50-50, pretty much split between all right, this is an easier team and this is kind of a harder team. So we will see what happens with the schedule, but we need to learn some of these things. And the first thing, how good are Luka and Kyrie together? How good are those two guys? Because they will dictate. Those two guys can dictate so many things. Think about everything you've seen Luka do himself through the playoffs last year, regular season, so many games, the Clippers series the last couple of years. Think of all the things you've seen Luka do and the heights that he's carried this team to by himself. The Mavericks have never had anybody else like Kyrie on their team before with Luka. They've actually never had anybody like Kyrie ever, probably. Like Kidd and Nash are just very different players in the past. You start looking at Brad Davis, very different player. Start looking at like Derek Harper, very different player. Rolando Blackman, just different type of player. Could score, but different type of player. They've never had anybody like Kyrie that can on the court. So what Luka and Kyrie can do together is a huge question, because this is not only just a ceiling raising trade, this is a floor raising trade too. You start with the floor. Okay, why is this a floor raising trade? Fourth quarters, regular season, Luka's been gassed. He's been bad in fourth quarters. I think even my boss, David Locke, host of Locked On Jazz, tweeted something about how bad Luka's been in like closing moments of fourth quarters this year. Yeah, he has. He's been bad. He hasn't been good in the clutch this year because he's been gassed by the time he's been carrying the whole offensive load. He's having to, instead of having a guy like Brunson that can create on his own, plus a guy like Dinwiddie, like having those two guys, he instead has Tim Hardaway Jr. and Christian Wood. And how that changes for Luka himself is he has to create for them. So then all of a sudden you've changed the whole thing up. The Mavericks have been able to replace the offense, but they haven't been able to replace when the offense comes from, because Luka is gassed by the time the fourth quarter comes. It's just too much. And so you bring in Kyrie. Now all of a sudden he can take over in fourth quarters. You saw it in the Timberwolves game before the All-Star break. The Mavericks would have lost that game by like 25 before this season. Instead, they lose the game really close. Kyrie has an incredible comeback, and when those two are finally hitting at this on the same wavelength here, when they finally figure out the hey, your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn of the last second shot, or even during the game, like that is a symptom of what they're doing during the game. When they figure that out, that's it. Like that's it. Once they figure it out, it's going to be next level offense, next level basketball, and they're going to be able to cover up so many deficiencies from this team. Luka himself covers up a ton of deficiencies. Think about Luka plus another guy that's an all-star starter, a generational scorer, a generational ball handler, playmaker, and all that. Then think about Luka just off the court at any given moment of the game, not even just fourth quarters. Like there are times you say, we have to play Luka this whole fourth quarter. But think about any time during the game. Luka's on-off numbers have just been insane this year. What he's had to do. If you want to make a case for Luka for MVP, just look at his on-off numbers. Luka right now is a plus 9.7 points per possession. So the Mavericks are scoring about 10 points per 100 possessions more when Luka's on the court compared to off, according to Cleaning the Glass. And they take out garbage time and heaves and all kinds of weird stuff. They filter all that out. This is like the purest form of what their games have been. Kyrie already through like 4 games is a plus 10 on the on-off. He's already taken that. What Luka has done, and he's already doing it. So like, think about when they get that going. Kyrie's only played 2 games with Luka, so there's really not much like statistically we can take from that. But just in 4 games with Kyrie, the 2 without Luka and the 2 with, his on-off is already plus 10. So that's a floor-raising trade. It's also a ceiling-raising trade because you are going to be better in crunch time. You're going to be better in all these different areas. You can also beat teams. You're going to be able to beat teams that try the traps, the double teams on Luka. Matt, think about all the times. I put my head down and just sigh, thinking about all the times this season that Luka Doncic was double teamed. It was so many. I feel like I can see it. And then explosions and all kinds of stuff in my head at the same time. So many double teams. Kyrie's going to be able to help that. He's going to take away some of those double teams. And he's going to be able to be the release valve. Imagine Kyrie is the release valve and not Dwight Powell. When Obi-Wan and New Hope says, it's like a million voices all screaming out at the same time. I just heard like a million sighs of relief all across MFFL Nation, Mavs, across all Mavs fans. I just heard you in your car. I heard you at home sitting there going, Oh, man, that's so true. Oh, it's going to be so much better. Coming up, let's keep talking about Luka and Kyrie. Then we'll talk about who else can step up for this Dallas Mavericks team and who can be in that 9th rotation spot. I think they only need one more. We'll talk about that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of Locked On. You can go check out FanDuel right now. And brand new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. Go see what they have. You can bet up to $1,000 and they'll give it back to you for your first bet. So go try it. Just go see what it's like. Go try it right now. If you're thinking about Luka for MVP, it's a long way off here. He's plus 2,100. He's behind Jokic, who's the favorite again. Embiid, he's plus 600. So he's a decent ways behind Embiid, or a decent ways behind Jokic according to the odds here. Giannis is a step behind Joel Embiid, and then Tatum is plus 1,800. So that's a considerable step behind. And then Luka is behind Tatum at plus 2,100. Behind Luka is Ja Morant, though, plus 6,500. So there's a big gap. There are definite tiers. It's Jokic by himself. A little bit underways is Embiid, and then Giannis. They're kind of the same. And then another step down is Tatum and Luka. That's how FanDuel sees it. You can go bet on that if you're interested in that. Go check out the no sweat first bet up to $1,000. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. All right, Isaac, thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen each and every day and every post game. We will be here. Thank you for hanging out with us, being part of the Raccoon Squad. You're a part of the Raccoon Squad if you listen to the show every day. All right, let's get into Luka and Kyrie. One last thing here. Oh, dang, I got to do one more thing. With Luka and Kyrie, it's not just about them playing separately. It's about them playing together. So for the rest of the 22 games, I want to see how they can work off of each other, how they can make it work to where they're working in unison and not just your turn, my turn. We're going to see some your turn, my turn. Of course, that's what this offense has been all year. But Kyrie has kind of brought in and implemented a little bit of that ball movement, the passing. We've talked about the passing numbers over and over again. I'll remind you of them. Mavericks averaged 267 passes a game before the Kyrie trade. In the 4 games since the Kyrie trade, 330 passes, which should lead the league. That's a big difference. That's a big philosophical change. So not just how Luka and Kyrie look together. How do these two different philosophical ways look? What do they do after the All-Star break? Do they try and implement anything else? This first Spurs game I think is going to be really interesting. And I think some of these really easy games I mentioned, they play the Spurs 3 times, the Hornets twice. Those games are going to be let's try some stuff. Let's try some Luka and Kyrie pick and roll. Let's try some weird stuff. And let's experiment, because we know that in the fourth quarter, we can just turn it on and beat these teams. It's just how it works. So they'll mess around in those games, and then they'll figure something out. And Jason Kidd will be messing with rotations, and that's what I expect in those 5 games. We'll see if it happens, but that's what I expect in those games. And so I'm interested to see how they look together. How can they work in unison? We know separately they're 2 of the best isolation scorers in the NBA. That's going to be great in the playoffs. They're going to need that in the playoffs. Think about all the times when Brunson or Dinwiddie were asked to go get a bucket in the playoffs, and they did for the most part. Now it's Kyrie Irving. Now it's one of the greatest scorers the NBA has seen this, in this generation. That's a big difference. And so the question is, how good are Luka and Kyrie? How good is Luka plus Kyrie is kind of the question I've been asking. Next question I want to answer, though, is who else steps up? When I'm looking at the Mavs rotation going into the playoffs, a playoff rotation is really only 8 or 9 guys. It's very, very rare that you play 10 guys in a playoff series. You even look at last year. Look at what the Mavericks did last year in the playoffs. And you had the main guys of Reggie and Dorian, Luka and Brunson and Dinwiddie, Maxey, about 25 minutes. And then there's a drop-off. Dwight and Davis played every game. That's 8. Then Josh Green played 16 games. Frank played 12 games. So that one of those spots in the rotation is it depends on what you need in that matchup. And I think the Mavericks have that this year, but that's given that the rest of your guys are solid in your rotation. So where are the Mavericks right now this season? Luka, Kyrie, Reggie Bullock, Josh Green, Tim Hardaway, and Maxey. That's 6 players. And those are I think guaranteed playoff spots, playoff rotation spots. They're all bringing different things. They're all bringing a lot to the table in their own ways. Maybe not a lot, but they're all bringing things in their own way to the table. Christian Wood is the 7th one, I think. I'm fascinated to see what Jason Kidd thinks about Christian Wood. We've talked about Christian Wood a lot this year. I think he should be bigger part of the rotation than he's been. Jason Kidd disagrees with me. He's the coach. So that's what's going to happen. So we've talked a lot about what is and not necessarily what we think, but I think they have to lean into the Christian Wood thing. But come playoff time, it's going to be fascinating, especially with Maxi Kleber back. How will they lean into him? Will it just be, who works better with him, Luka or Kyrie? The moment, I think he's going to play his same kind of off the bench role. You look at what Dwight played last year, or Davis played last year, 10 to 14 minutes. I know. I hear you. But that's probably going to be his role. Think about the guys in front of him. Then you have like the Dwight JaVale spot. I think the Dwight Powell, JaVale McGee spot is the same as last year. You have one of those guys play like 10 to 15 minutes, and or both those guys combined for that. Who knows? And to remind you about Dwight, when people say, "Oh, well, Dwight was out of the playoff rotation," he was out of the playoff rotation, so he's not going to be part of it. Okay, Dwight Powell averaged 18 minutes a game against the Jazz in the first round series. He averaged 13 minutes a game against the Suns, and then 10 minutes a game against the Warriors. Still not nothing. He still played. Now, it was like a weird spot start, and then he didn't really see the floor again. He started like in the first quarter and the third quarter, and that was kind of it by the Warriors series. So that's what you remember. But don't forget, in the playoffs, first round, he was playing 18 minutes a game against the Jazz. So there is a role there. And I think Dwight and JaVale kind of combined for that. So I'm combining them as one spot. They're the 8th spot. So we got Luka, Kyrie, Bullock and Green, the wings, Tim Hardaway, Maxey when he's back, and that's the big thing we'll talk about in the third segment. Christian Wood in his own kind of category that could be DNP-CDs at times in the playoffs. I'm serious. He's the 7th spot. The Dwight and JaVale spot, that's 8. And then you have this 9th spot. Who else steps up? That's the big question. You have 5 options, I think. Actually, no, you have 5 options because those are the only players left. The two-way guys cannot play. McKinley Wright and AJ Lawson cannot play. They will not be part of this. They'll not be part of the playoffs. They cannot play in the playoffs. You have 6 guys, I guess you could consider now that Theo Pinson has kind of emerged here. I'll consider him. Markieff Morris is the first one I'm really looking at, because if you look at what the Mavericks don't have, they don't have size. They don't have size at a big man, really, with Dwight and JaVale and Christian Wood. Like they're struggling there. They're also struggling on the wings because Reggie Bullock and Josh Green and Tim are not like big wings. They're like 6'6", all of them. They're all 6'6", basically. Josh may be a hair under that, but they're all about 6'6". Markieff Morris a little bit bigger. According to Callie Kaplan, he told Callie Kaplan of Dallas Morning News, quote, "I wasn't in the Nets rotation, so yeah, I'm a little out of shape. I would say I'm in shape, but I'm not in top basketball shape that I could be." And so I think Kid's going to give him a chance after All-Star. I'm really fascinated to see what he looks like, how he's part of this team, and all that, what he can bring to this team. I think he'll bring wing size and experience. I mean, Isaac would call it a bubble playoffs, but at least he played with Jason Kidd as the assistant coach, and Kidd knows what he's capable of. The Mavericks need a guy like that. He's been shooting decently well with the Nets. He hasn't shot well for his career from 3, really, but he did shoot 40% with the Nets in limited sample size. So I'm interested to see what he looks like. And he comes back after the All-Star game in shape. I think there's a role for him. Justin Holiday, I think he may have a really good chance to play some minutes. Buyout guy. The Mavericks just added him. He was playing with the Hawks this year. He's 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan. He's played in 9 career playoff games, which is not a lot for like a 33-year-old. But he played 4 games with Indiana in 2020, and he played like 33 minutes a game for them. So that's like decent experience. He at least was part of a big time part of a rotation in the playoffs at some point. It was only 4 games, but at least it was at some point. This year he fell out of the Hawks rotation, but he's still like a useful vet. He can play good team defense. He'll be a guy out there. Like imagine the Frank Ntilikina minutes from last year going to Justin Holiday. Like I think that's what we're looking at probably. And he can shoot better than Frank Ntilikina for sure. So I'm really interested to see how he fits in as well, because I think they could actually use him. He could easily be that 9th guy. Markieff, Justin Holiday, Davis Bertans. Don't count out Davis Bertans. The Latvian laser. Pew, pew, pew. Don't count him out. He's been out with a calf injury since February 2nd. We'll see what happens with him going into these next couple of games here. But last year, he had 5 DNP CDs during the season. He ended up playing every single playoff game last year. and averaging 11 minutes a game. He played every playoff game. There's something about what he brings to the table. Now, we know it's shooting, but he also tries on defense, and that matters for something in the playoffs. He had 5 DNP CDs last year where he just didn't even play in the regular season. He's had 5 so far this year. His role is a little bit less than it was last season so far, but don't count him out as a spot, as being part of that last part of that rotation spot. Frank Ntilikina is another one where you look at Frank and you're like, well, but he just hasn't played this year. Yeah, he's had 15 DNP CDs. It did not play coach's decision. He's had 15 of those this year where he's just sat out. Not injured, just sat out and they didn't play him. He had 15 last year too. And last year he had 19 games where he played less than 5 minutes. So he just got thrown in there. So essentially a DNP CD as well. So you're looking at, 24 games where he was just kind of around. 34 games, I'm sorry. 34 games where he was just kind of around and it wasn't really a big part of the rotation. This year, 15 DNP CDs and 8 games under 5 minutes. So he's actually a little bit more part of the rotation this year than he has been last year, to be honest. And last year, he did not play the entire Utah series. He didn't really play the first 2 games of the Phoenix series, and then he played 12 minutes a game the rest of the playoffs. He came in, played well against Devin Booker. So who knows? He's a wild card that Jason Kidd could pull out of his back pocket depending on the matchup and be part of the playoff rotation. I think it would probably go to Justin Holiday instead of Frank Ntilikina now, but we counted Frank out last year, and I don't know about you, but
people forget about Frank.
Gotcha. You thought I wasn't going to do it. You thought I wasn't. The last one is one of the last ones is Jaden Hardy. I think at this point of the season, with 22 games left, I think he's out of a playoff rotation. Rookie. He's already a mistake-prone rookie. Defense is really lacking for him at this point, and they haven't developed him enough. We haven't seen enough from Jaden Hardy to me, and I know Jason Kidd hasn't seen enough of him. 31 games in the NBA, which is actually surprising to me, but he's played that many games. But even this last stretch where he's played, since January 1st, he's played 20 games, 15 minutes a night, basically. So that wasn't enough. They needed to start him earlier. Honestly, December even would have been a little bit earlier to start him and get him working into the defense. Just hasn't panned out. I don't see him. Maybe he comes in as a spot shooter here and there. His defense is just not good enough to throw him out there. You cannot make mistakes in the playoffs now anymore. So coming up, let's talk about what this defense is capable of, because I think that's another huge question the Mavericks have to answer. I don't know if they can answer it the rest of these 22 games, so I saved it for the end. But let's talk about it. What does it hinge on? Talk about that coming up. All right, Isaac, we talked about what the last rotation spot could be. I actually left a name out now that I think about it. Theo Pinson is the last one. I don't know I don't know what coach really thinks of Theo Pinson at this point in the season, because he was just not playing and didn't have a role. And all of a sudden, the last 5 games, he's played 16 minutes a night and been actually part of the rotation. He did not play a ton this year, and all of a sudden has been part of the rotation. I think Justin Holiday, Markieff Morris, Davis Bertans maybe coming back. I think they maybe replace him. I think having somebody that's played with Kyrie before helped, and then he had that good fourth quarter, and then that extended his time a little bit. I don't think he's actually going to be considered for that 9th spot in the rotation, but we'll see. The defense, though. What is this defense capable of? I think it hinges on literally one person. It does. And we have been, our eyes have been rolled. Eyes have been rolled at Isaac and I for literal years, talking about how important Maxi Kleber is to this team. But he's so important to this team. He's been out now with this hamstring injury. He should be back after the All-Star break. We'll see exactly how close to after the All-Star break, but he's been out since the beginning of December. But he is what all this hinges on. Because if he's out, the Mavericks defense in the middle between Dwight Powell, JaVale, how he's been he's definitely been in and out, and Christian Wood, they just don't have any kind of defense in the middle at all. And the Mavericks already struggled on defense in the middle during the playoffs last year. They got by because of their 3-point shooting and the calculation you have to make for, all right, we're going to give up rebounding, we're going to give up stuff in the paint. but we're going to defend you on the perimeter, and you're not going to make more threes than us. That was the Mavs calculus last year in the playoffs. And Maxi Kleber played a huge part in that because two reasons. He can switch and he can shoot. That's it. He's big, he can switch, and he can shoot. Maybe just the three. He's such a big part of what this team did last year. Even though he only played 25 minutes a game during the regular season, 25 minutes a game during the playoffs. Those 25 minutes were very big. And if you don't have those, the Mavericks don't win the playoff series they do last year, I don't think. He shot 43% in the playoffs. He had that one game where he hit 8 threes, was it, against the Jazz? Huge. Just massive. Like he hit 8 threes against the Jazz. He had 5 threes in game 1 against the Suns. He's just a big player. They need him. And if he's out, it creates such a bigger hole than you'd think for the Mavericks. So his return is a big deal. Josh Green filling in for Dorian. That's a huge thing that we have that's been untested. Dorian at least had gone through the 2 Clippers series, then the Jazz, then the Suns. We had at least seen Dorian in a playoff series. We have not seen Josh Green successfully in a playoff series yet. So that's a huge ask. Reggie Bullock's the same. He fills his own spot from last year. Although I do feel like he's taken a slight step backwards. Maybe not even a slight, maybe a half step backwards from last year. So Josh filling in for Dorian, Reggie filling in for himself, even though he's a little step slower. That is a big deal. So what is the defense capable of? It really hinges on Maxi's health and Maxi being available, Josh Green with Dorian, and then what can Reggie Bullock be the same as last year? Then all of a sudden, you have a completely different question. When I talked about the defense earlier in the episode, the Mavericks now, their rotation last year consisted of Brunson, who was like solid, Dinwiddie, who was like not good, but at least he was 6'6", but not good in the playoffs, like defensively really, but plays his role and is a smart guy and like knows where to be and stuff. And now you're replacing that with you're looking at that. You're replacing it with and Dorian too. Let's throw Dorian in. We're replacing it with Kyrie, Tim Hardaway, Christian Wood, and like what Dwight's role is going to be. It's just you're just taking a step down defensively, pretty much all across the board, except for Kyrie. Kyrie has surprised me. I think Kyrie is better than Brunson, definitely better than Dinwiddie defensively. He'll learn the defense. He'll figure out where he needs to be and all that. He's already been a better option. Even just 4 games in, what I've seen is enough. I've seen enough. He's better than the guards the Mavericks had last year. Tim Hardaway and Christian Wood are a different question. If Jaden Hardy is part of it, that's an even different question. The Dwight Powell, JaVale McGee roles is still kind of up in the air, and a weakness that they had last year that they needed to fill that they didn't fill, or they tried to and failed. So this defense, the 3 guys I mentioned up top are the crux of it. And then these the supporting cast around them is massive. And I think that this team is capable of a little less than last year because of those supporting guys, which is why I don't know how big of a role Christian Wood's going to have. We know Tim Hardaway is going to have a big role no matter what. It's one of those things that some people may never understand with Jason Kidd. I certainly don't. Then all of a sudden, you can't look at any of the defensive numbers this season. I started to look at on-off. I started to look at, okay, well, Dorian was off and Bullock and Josh Green were on the court this year. You can't look at any of the numbers. Team's totally different. Even just a couple of players change. That's 80 minutes a game that have changed from Dorian and Dinwiddie to now Kyrie and, bringing back Tim Hardaway, and all that. So it's too different. You can't look at any of the numbers. The rest of these 22 games, we will see what this team is capable of defensively. And I'm really interested to see what it is. I think they're capable of a little less than last year. But I think offensively, think about what I talked about at the beginning with Luka and Kyrie, they can cover up more than what the Mavericks could do last year. So I think in the aggregate, this team should be better than last year. Last year got some good matchups. We'll see what matchups the Mavs get this year. It's all dependent on matchups. We'll do some more playoff preview for sure as we get through it, and then stick along with the ride with us for the rest of this 22 games. We'll be here, guys. Thanks for making us your first listen. Go check out Locked On NBA Game to Game. We did one on the trade deadline recently. You can go check out Locked On NBA, the actual show. Jackson Gatlin talked with a couple of hosts on Locked On NBA about the All-Star Weekend. I'm sure Matt Moore and David Ramil will have you covered, so go check it out. Guys, thanks for listening to Locked On Mavs. Peace out. Boom!